I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 218 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. My guest, Leslie Hershberger, is here to talk about a centers-based approach to the Enneagram. Well, last week, you'll recall, I introduced the Enneagram for the first time on the show. And this week, I have a guest with me who coaches from a centers-based approach to the Enneagram. One of the coaches at Brilliant Balance actually has worked with Leslie in the past, and she was so excited about her approach that she recommended we bring her onto the show, and I am so glad that we did. So what you're going to hear us do today is break up the 9 Enneagram types that I shared last week into 3 centers, and we're going to dig around a little for the insights that those centers illuminate. So if you missed last week's episode and you're not familiar with the Enneagram, I would strongly recommend you start there, go back and listen to episode 217, and then come back and do this one because it's just not going to make any sense if you don't have context. And if you're familiar with the Enneagram in some other way, then that's fine. You don't need to listen to last week's. You'll be right up to speed. So let's talk a little bit about my guest. Leslie Hershberger is a consultant, a writer, a master teacher, a facilitator, and she guides individuals and teams in the field of human transformation and practical change. I love how she talks about that. She's really a visionary, and she has just this uncanny ability to see and relate to almost anyone from the perspective of their highest potential. And because of that, she's worked with hundreds of individuals and teams throughout the United States and in Europe over the last several decades. She has a really impressive depth of experience and knowledge. She's funny, she's soulful. She really sees patterns in people and in frameworks that makes her really exceptional in her work. Leslie actually lives outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, where I live, with her husband, Dave. And she says together they hang out with their 3 grown children and significant others, and also their grandchild, Alejandro. They travel extensively and balance their travels between Leslie's love of vibrant cultures, cities, and ancient ruins, and Dave's love of trekking in the wilderness where no human hath trod. Please meet Leslie Hershberger. Well, welcome to the show, Leslie. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Sherilyn.
This is a favorite topic for me. I do Enneagram work with really all of our coaching clients, especially like our VIP clients who we call bold, women in bold. And so I'm so excited to get into this next level of the Enneagram with you. It's such a rich tool. So we could talk for days, I'm sure.
I give multiple day retreats and classes. So yes.
So fun.
You can go for days. You could go as deep as you want, as wide as you want, quite honestly.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about how you got into the Enneagram and interested in this.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. I got into it, I would say, over maybe like 22, 23 years ago. I was trying to understand my children so that I could make them be like me, so I would feel less anxious. And so, quite frankly, I had done the Myers-Briggs. Mm-hmm. I thought it was extremely useful, but the Enneagram, when I read through the first, and I literally picked up a book, someone told me about it. Mm-hmm. I picked up the book. A lot of people, you do tests back then. There just weren't any online tests. There wasn't, their online world was barely had started. And so I just read a book, thought I was a 1, which is my mom's type. So you all know that we tend to introject our parents' type. So I thought I was a 1. Uh-huh. Then I thought I was a 2, my father's type. So then I just went through 1 through 9, but it was when I got to 7 that I started to blush. I started to feel hot. I started to feel a little bit shaky because my teacher is a 6. And she wrote the book, and she goes straight on in. She said, I would not have this system would have meant nothing to me if it started with the positive, because I don't orient that way. I wouldn't have trusted it. It started with what gets in the way of your full aliveness. And so I felt like somebody was killing me softly with their words. I was like, it was every conflict I'd ever had with my partner and just everything. So, yeah. And then learning, and I said to her, oh God, this is so amazing. Like when I went through my training, and I said, I want to get everybody into it. She said, do you love them? And I said, yeah. She said, then change yourself and they'll see that and it will matter to them.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And I think it's so relatable that when you first hear the resonance of your type, if you're oriented through the negative, it's a little jarring. You can feel some big emotions around that, or maybe even rejection. And then you sort of move through it and see the power, which is so awesome.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, definitely. It was, that's exactly what it felt like. I actually went out and bought another book where they showed stages of health and just designated myself as the most healthy.
That was one way through it. I love it.
Yeah. And then I went to the training with Helen and I got my tops busted.
And she said, no, thank you. Right. Oh my gosh.
I kind of noticed a few things.
Oh, so you've been doing this work in various ways and stages since then. Tell us about the Narrative Enneagram. That's new terminology to me.
So the Narrative Enneagram is rooted in the narrative tradition. And I think it's hands down, and I'm biased, but I've seen a lot of Enneagram presentations. I've learned a lot from all the different teachers. But I think it's so good is because it's grounded in the narratives of other people who inhabit that type. So if I'm teaching about threes and I am doing a 6-week class, I am going to get a set of threes on the panel. And I'm going to hear it straight from the lived experience of threes who deal with this orientation of paying attention to tasks, goals, efficiencies, image, success. And I am going to make sure that I choose panelists who the audience connects with. I'm going to make sure. So if you're doing firefighters, you have firefighters on the panel, or some firefighters on the panel. I try to get people. Sometimes I do like difference so that people can grow. But when people can hear, they also sense the types. So people will sense a group of threes on the panel look very different than a group of sevens. And I start to highlight what I notice. And it goes straight into their attentional, how they pay attention, how they sort, their sorting filter for life, their energetic levels. Nines tend to be grounded, lower energy. The sevens and threes, there's going to be a more up and out energy. And so the audience feels it. They're actually learning through their bodies and they're learning through their lived experience.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating to think that it's visible and palpable, maybe that the energy is palpable even through a panel, maybe conducted virtually. You can still sort of feel the energy.
Oh, I've done, the Narrative Enneagram has been, they've never had their classes so full because people come from all over the world to our training, and they've never had so many people because people can come, you can have somebody from South Africa in on the panel. And it's just the online panels, I've done them myself. I've participated in them and I've facilitated them. And they've been really good. I like in person better. I just did, for one of my corporate clients, I did a panel a few weeks ago. I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy to be back.
I know. Nothing like being in the room with that energy. That's
and everybody coming up going, oh my God, I've never seen it done this way. This is so good. We got to do more of this. Yeah.
That's awesome. So the narrative piece of it really is storytelling. It's using the stories of people who've lived that experience to sort of bring to life, what does this look like? What's observable? Fascinating.
So I will ask different questions. So that this panel that I just described to you, what we did is I said to them, I wanted to have them reflect on, given your type, how was this pandemic for you? I wanted it to make it alive. I wanted it to be real time. Like, what was it like for you, given your type? And oh my God, Cheryl, I just learned so much. And that's the other piece as a teacher. You're learning all my materials. I've got stacks and stacks of materials that I use in corporate trainings and that kind of thing. And all of them come from the narrative, from threes telling me, like, what's it like? What is it like there? And what makes, when do you notice that, the anxiety rise? Talk to me a little bit about that. How do we need to communicate with you? What's your blinds? What are some blind spots that you've learned by working with your type?
Yes.
That's where I get all my data. Is I get it from the types.
It's so interesting that, and there's no coincidences, but I was reading Brene Brown's new book, Atlas of the Heart, and I was listening to her talk about the book. I know we're all, but she said something, you've probably heard her say this in a round of press. And she said, she used to think empathy was the answer. And she said, really, can we really have empathy? What we really want to do is listen to people tell us their stories and believe them. And that's what I'm hearing in your, this narrative approach is you can't really understand my story, but you can listen to it and believe me, that, which I thought was such powerful language.
It's something that's connecting. And you have, as I'm really trained in the facilitation of this, so I know the patterns. I can see like when the pattern is emerging and what the client is, or what the panelist has shared, and then highlight that and then make connections, And so what I found is as I listened to my panels, when I got home, Cheryl, and I just wanted to hug everyone in my family, I all of a sudden understood my mom's and one, it's like, oh, wow. So that was this insatiable need to fix us all was her way of expressing care.
Yes.
That's how she shows love, because aren't only perfect people lovable? Aren't people who follow this high moral standard lovable? And that includes herself. And I listened to the lived suffering of living with that constant inner critic as I listened to the ones on the panel, that I could come home and I could see that in my mother. And it just really opened up a lot for me. And it continues to.
In connection, which is something that the women in our coaching community have been asking about a lot, is how the Enneagram is sort of this gateway to deeper connection and understanding. So I hope we'll get into that maybe as we go. Yeah. So the thing that you uncovered and kind of fell in love with was the centers approach to the Enneagram. And I think that's really why I wanted to have you on the podcast, and is talk to us about this centers approach to the Enneagram.
The progenitors of the Enneagram who brought it to the United States, for the most part, are head types on the Enneagram. Okay.
I see.
And so there's a lot of information, a lot of data, which is really important, right? To understand it, to learn all the ins and outs, wings and arrows and all those kinds of things. That was really, really useful. But we started to realize that, information, okay, so now what, right? And so the next center is the heart center. And the heart center is really about that human survival need for connection. And so the panels are very heart-centered. I think the panels are a 3-centered approach. But the panels, you start to connect with one another, as we've said here in the stories. And then the body-based types, or the body picks things up energetically. What struck me as I asked I'm a head type. I asked a heart type and a body type to do this research with me. And what struck me as we did the research was that the heart types aren't the feeling types. The body types are.
That makes perfect sense to me. Can you, before we go 1 second further, put the numbers into the centers for the listener?
So I'll start with the body. And the reason I'm going to start with the body is because in the development of the brain and the development of the person, we're instinctual beings. We're hungry, we cry. We're cold, we cry. We feel comfortable, we smile. Those are instinctual, primal in the primitive reptilian brain. So the body scent types are types 8, 9, and 1. Then we start learning to connect. All right. And connecting types are types 2, 3, and 4. But what I really learned in the centers approach, they're not connected to themselves. They're connected to the other. The head types are about meaning, safety, security, trying to figure it all out. That's types 5, 6, and 7. And it impacts how you work with them, how you coach them, how you work with a team and understand a team. It's completely changed how I, understand team dynamics.
It's so interesting. So it's 2, 3, 4 are in the heart, 8, 9, 1 were the body, and 5, 6, 7 are the head.
Yes.
7 feels like an outlier to me there. Does it to most people when they hear that?
Why? Say more about that.
Well, I think of 5 and 6 as cerebral and security oriented. And I think of 7 as fanciful and prone to adventure and adventure seeking.
Yeah. So what I would say is this, is that I joke with people that I'm a 6 and I'm a 7. And scratch a 7 and you get a 6. It's fear driving it. Okay. The idealization of my type structure is I'm okay.
I'm
right?
so okay.
I'm okay. I'm good. And as a mother, I have to make you okay. So I'm okay. Okay. So there's that fear stuff back there. Don't want to look at that. So I'll go to the idealized future of who we are, what we could be, what my children could be. And there's a lot of plans, pleasure, possibilities. Who could they be? And it's because it's future oriented, I'm not seeing what's in front of me in the present moment. Well, don't go there. Because if I stay in the present moment, that child in front of me or that partner, my husband or me, I might have to feel those painful feelings. And the avoidance of 7 is pain, boredom, and limitations. It's driven by fear. And fear it's the mammalian need for safety and security to know we're going to be okay. And so the pandemic was a doctoral level course in uncertainty.
Yes.
Everyone had the experience of. So what I'm going to do, like every head type, is I'm going to try to sort data, see what fits, what doesn't fit, always knowing there's more to life than meets the eye. Head types see things other people don't see. They're constantly, their observational skills are pretty pointed. It's why I think it's what makes me a good panel facilitator, because I see things, I see patterns. And 7 see life, 7 synthesize information. I'm trying to see how I need to make things fit like all head types, because if things don't fit, Cheryl Ann, I feel anxious.
Right. Right. And that's really everybody who's in the head type, any of those types, not just 7. So sort of fall into that.
So with 6s, what they do, rather than look at best case scenario that I'm running from, towards, they're looking at worst case scenario, because you need to be prepared. If it's a scary world, I better know who my people are. I better know who the authority figures are. I better know, who's the out group that, kind of isn't with us, right? And so I'm going to sort. My sorting filter is inferences. What does she mean by that? Doubt in self, doubt in the other, doubt in this project, doubt in this Enneagram thing, doubt in that teacher, doubt in that coach. I say to anybody when I'm mentoring coaches that just expect to be doubted by a 6. That's just how it works. And it's so that I can be prepared and I can kind of relax. And so for all of us head types, our buried center is the heart center. That center, and 7s don't look like that. Self-preservation 6s, or they're a security-seeking 6. They don't look like that. We look warm. And in some sense, I am. But if I'm talking to you right now and I get so into my information, but I'm not connecting with you, and I'm not remembering there's a group of people out there, I can get in my data and lose you.
Interesting.
So there's a disconnect that happens. So, I just completed, I laugh, you are, the way you implement things is, you make things happen in that doing center. With head types, we think about making things happen.
Yes. Yes. Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. So contrast that. So we talked a little bit about the head center, talk about the heart, and then maybe we'll go back to the body. We'll go in reverse order.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's go in reverse order. And that's a lot of times, I think that's how Enneagram's developed and that's how it's taught. So the heart center, this is the core emotion, for heart types. So for me, for the head types, it's fear. For the heart types, it's sadness or panic. It's panic at loss of connection. So this is that need we have for human connection. And so that's associated with the emotional center. And if our basic, no matter what type you are, if you're basic mammalian, I mean, we are mammals at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And if our mammalian needs for connection and approval aren't met, we get a little panicky. And so the heart types may look feeling centered to others, but they're often out of touch with their own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Their value and sense of security lies in getting approval from the other. And so they're good shapeshifters.
Yes.
And I can imitate, like, how do people talk? Like, how do people talk? What do they wear? How do they act in this group in order to get, to be able to fit myself in some way? And I'm going to look to them to get a sense of myself. I did a good job if you think I did a good job. If there's some sort of external monocle of success or of connection. So I look outward to get a sense of who I am. And I'm a lot of times doing connection, but I'm not really present to myself. All right. So
relatable. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like, who am I with? What people am I hanging out? How do I look? What do you think of me? How am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
And they do it in 3 different ways, depending upon their type.
So interesting. My husband has teased me for years that when we're getting dressed to go somewhere, I need to think about, well, how do people dress there? Like it can be anything from a baseball game to a ball, the appropriateness of like needing to fit versus standing out or being the same at all of those places would not make any sense. And I live in that center, so that it's the shape shifting is resonant.
Shape shifting is huge, and doing is the core function.
Yeah, so you earn it.
So when I'm coaching, whether it be a couple or a team, the heart types are constantly monitoring the room, and they're not with themselves. And a lot of times, actual connection comes when you're with yourself too, and you're your authentic self, rather than, it's kind of like that feeling. Did y'all ever have that in 7th grade? I moved to Cincinnati when I was in 6th grade, and I moved to Connecticut, and I called my brother Paul. My parents were from New Jersey. Well, I get here and everybody teases me. So I literally practiced in the mirror. Paul. They wore straight leg jeans there. They wore bells here. It was just like, what do I wear? I don't want to be teased. I want to fit in. No, I'm not a heart type. It was, fear was really driving my show.
Sure.
But if anybody can tap into that way we may adapt in order to fit in. And for the 3s, I'm connecting if I'm successful, and I can hit the top of the mountain. So I'm really competitive. For the 2, I'm connected if I'm helpful and I'm noticing needs.
Yes.
And, shape shifting to be needed in the eyes of significant others, not everybody, just people, either the power, they tend to be the power behind the throne. They tend to, have their people that all their attention goes on, and they can have blind spots to other people. But it is to significant people that I'm needed and I'm helpful. And for the 4, looks a little different. The 4 doesn't want to be like everybody else. They're going to say, how can I be different? And I have a daughter who's a 4, and I'll never forget bringing them out for shoes when they were little. And I'm thinking, I've moved a lot, and, you just want to fit in. So I said, okay, what are all the kids wearing this year? And she said, why would I want to wear what everybody else is wearing?
This is my son. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why would I want to do that?
Why would I want to do that? What? I'm not going to wear it. Everybody else is wearing that. So I'm connected if I'm special, and I'm searching for the ideal love, the ideal circumstance that can make me feel alive and authentic and connected. So there's 3 different ways of doing connection.
Amazing.
And I actually reached out to my daughter to complete the online course that I just created, because she orients to doing. These are the tasks that have to be done. I had all this information. Mom, we can't include all that. It's too much. It'll overwhelm them. So it was so good to have a heart type to be attending, right, to how it was going to land inside other people.
That's fascinating. So, and again, 2, 3, and 4 live in that heart center and yet show up differently. And then the 3rd center is the body.
Yes, the
This
third
is
center is the
891.
body. And I would say this one was huge for me. This was huge in terms of my research. I was doing it with an 8. So that the other two people, one was an 8 and one is a 2. And this 8, she was so thrilled to discover she was the feeling center because she knew it. She knew she felt things, and her mom was a 2, and she's like, I didn't experience her that way. You know, she said, for me, the feelings are so overwhelming. They're intense, they're emotional. And before they're even in my conscious awareness, I have to control it. And so if I'm a 9, I'm going to numb it, right? If I'm an 8 or a 1, it's going to be kind of a 1, I might repress my strong feelings. The 8's going to kind of armor against them. But make no mistake, I mean, imagine discovering that 8s have this marshmallow heart. It changed the way I coached them. You know what was fascinating, Cheryl Ann? When I started doing grief work, the first grief clients, because I really wanted to experiment with this, working with the centers, were 8s.
Wow.
My first few clients were 8s who were dealing with grief so overwhelming, they thought it was going to wash them away.
Wow.
So their less comfortable emotions, though, are converted to anger because it feels less vulnerable.
Yes.
Fear feels vulnerable. Sadness feels vulnerable. And they want to just like forget the emotional issues of the past because I feel it makes me feel uncomfortable inside. They're very oriented towards comfort. And my energy is reserved for things I think are important. And so that helped me when I go look at things. To recognize, it's why sometimes like a body type would feel really highly defended or really checked out. But I thought if I can tap into that feeling part of them, right? If I can plug into and have them feel seen and truly see them, because they can sense deception so fast it'll make your head spin.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't shapeshift do like a heart, like I couldn't do connection. I had to actually feel what they were feeling on the inside.
That's fascinating. So when you work with people in these centers, do you work with them in triads? Like, do you bring those 3 numbers in that center together to do work, or how does it play out in practice?
So it depends. Am I coaching a team? Am I coaching a couple? I do couples work. Sometimes I'm doing conflict work within a executive team. Am I coaching a person? Am I doing spiritual work with people? What I know is this, is if I'm with the head types tend to think of if you're on your head, you can't feel your spine. They don't feel supported in the world. So I kind of have to show up pretty grounded so they can develop, their nervous system can relax. So I have to know that the second things for head types is the body. That's their secondary function. If I start setting goals for them to do something, to set goals, to do, they're not going to do it. When you have a client come in and they haven't done their work sometimes, they've got to sense it. It's got to get digestible. It can't just be in their head. All right. And that's why they come in and they haven't done their work. But the heart types, on the other hand, they may have done their goals. They may have done everything, but they haven't digested it. They're not feeling it. Right. I've done the book club, but did I really feel the emotions and atlas of the heart? Did I really feel? So what I have to do with heart types is the secondary function of the head. I work to try to get into their worldview and have them understand their worldview. I give them some ideas, some concepts. And then I might say, hey, how would it be if you closed your eyes for a moment? Let's just notice what's happening.
And then they cry. That's what would happen if you did that to me.
Everyone says to me, they have a joke with this one leadership group. They said, yeah, Leslie's the person who makes you cry.
Oh yeah. If we did that and then you said, now close your eyes and feel, I know it doesn't even matter what the feelings is. I would burst into tears and then I'd be really mad at you for making me cry. That's how that would go down.
That's
Classic.
Exactly it. And I said, it's not that I make you cry. It's that I brought you home to yourself.
Yes.
You were invited home. You walked into the door. You made space for your own body, your own experience. But I have to be very aware that the heart types can feel pretty overwhelmed fairly quickly by that. And so I want to also maybe make contact, doing contact to say we're doing, you're doing well here. Or this might be a piece you miss. This might be something to work on, but they need that contact, a smile, a nod. With a 4, they need to feel understood. And so I have to know those centers. With the body center, this is an important one to know if you're coaching a body type, particularly a leader. So body type, an 8 sent in, and there's some way that's going on within the team that they need some coaching. They need some interpersonal coaching. I am not going to be able to help them understand the team perspective because this is their buried center. But when they're stuck, because remember, we're armored. You're not getting in here, Cheryl Ann. It's a world out there where the strong take advantage of the weak, and it's about power, it's about control, and you're not crossing the boundary. My boss sent me to you. I'm defended, right? So the first thing I do is I go to, ask them to tell me their perspective and listen, mirror it back from the heart. And then I bring them inside themselves. They're a little more comfortable with the closing of the eyes a little bit because they'll trust. You have a certain sense of trust in me, and I might drop them inside themselves, and they start to have feelings. And the first thing I have to have them feel is their compassion for themselves within this team dynamic. After we've given enough space for that, typically there's a softening of the armor, and they can take on the perspective. So I might even bring them into a meditation of imagining their coworker, imagining their coworker's morning, their day. And I might know a little bit about their coworker's family or work circumstance so that they can empathize, right? So it's different with each center. I tend to the dominant center, and I don't want, like heart types, I don't like giving them projects because it becomes, or they'll want to make the coaching session a project.
Yes. Yeah.
And so what I have to do is bring them, into being and say the goal is to learn to be with yourself. And sometimes I've done this where I go for walks with them so they can't see my face. So
they can't respond to what you want them to get the facial expression that they want.
Right. But they can be with themselves and still be doing.
Yes.
My admin's a 3. And she said, Leslie, I would like perform meditation for you so that you would think I'm a really good meditator. I do all the right things in meditation. She said, what I learned to do when I'd be home, because I couldn't just sit in meditation, is I just rolled on an exercise ball and I'd feel my body on the exercise ball and start feeling my own body. Start there. Start with a walk. Start with 5 sensory experience. Start with something that brings you into contact.
It's fascinating. Like what I love about what I'm hearing in the center's approach is it's this undergirding to, types that you might look at. And I've been looking at the Enneagram for a while, but you look at them as distinctive. And there's this sort of undergirding that's common, yet it shows up differently in those, as I'm hearing you say it, through each of the 3 numbers that's kind of partnered in a type or a center. I mean, interesting.
And also understanding that it's in the body. So for you, Cheryl, you're a 3, right? Okay. So for you, the word goal is a really good word and a really good hook. So if I'm bringing you into a practice inside for meditation, I might say something like the goal here, because that word, you have a lot of neural pathways hooked into tasks and goals. So that's a way that it's a portal of entry for me. I don't want to stay there all the time because that is it's your gift and it gets overused. So what I want to do, though, is use that language that you get that is baked into your nervous system. And then that's the portal into something else. And every type kind of has those words.
The openers. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like I hear a little bit of meeting people where they are through that and then sort of taking them where they might have a more difficult time going on their own.
Yes. Yeah. And heavily respecting boundaries, paying attention to where they can go, where they cannot go. And to me, spirituality is that connecting to something larger than yourself, whatever that might be, and that developing and expanding capacity to be in the present moment. And so some people can go really deep into that. And deep is different things to different people.
Sure.
And I've really learned that through the center's approach. What are the benchmarks for different types? They're very, very different depending on the type and on the center.
So great. So tell the listeners where they can find you online, and then we will link to that in the show notes. Like, where's the best place for them to start?
Well, the good news, listeners, is I've just hired a second admin, which I'm so ridiculously excited about, so I can do more. I just finished this foundation. First of all, lesliehershberger.com. That's it. There's a ton of information on that. Every Enneagram type is there. I've got videos on there. I have a YouTube channel. And so just Leslie Hershberger on YouTube. And I've got a ton of videos, free videos, teaching about the type. I finally, thanks to my doing type daughter, finished the foundations of the Enneagram, the centers approach. And that it's great because I really unpack this. I go through each type in detail. I do interview panels. So there's a 2, a 3, and a 4, for that heart center, for every type. I've got somebody of everybody type, and I interview people I've worked with. And those interviews were during the pandemic. So everyone was kind of in
upheaval,
that really hard time, right? And so the interviews were transparent, they were real. And then I've got exercises, I've got meditations for each center on that course. It's really, I had to delete a lot because my daughter was very bossy, and my avoidance is limitations. And I was like, don't want to do this.
Awesome.
But
so if they go to lesliehershberger.com, they can find links into this course and other resources that you have available there. Perfect.
Yes. And
perfect. So we'll put that.
I have a coupon for your group. I have 25%
great.
for your group. Yeah.
Great. Well, we will put them into the show notes so people don't have to spell, right? That gets tricky sometimes with an audio format. It has been so great having you with us today for this episode. I know that we've done this 2-part Enneagram episode now on the show. And I hope that everyone listening is getting like the overall context and framework and this really fresh approach, really like to come at it through the centers. And if you are interested in taking that further, please do seek Leslie out for some support.
Love to have you all take that course. And we've got a Facebook group, we've got all that. And actually what we're going to do in January, we're going to have another group, another cohort release it, and then have Zoom calls with me, which anybody who even signs up now will be able to have access to those Zoom calls.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for joining us. You are a delight.
Thank you so much for having me, Cheryl Ann.
Well, thank you for joining me for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Leslie and that it gave you some fresh insights into the Enneagram. There really are just layers and layers to learn in this framework. So if you're interested, I hope you go check out Leslie's website and her resources. And I certainly hope you find your own Enneagram type and explore the richness that is inherent within it. If you're new to this community, come join us in the Facebook group. It's Brilliant Balance. Just go to Facebook and search groups. You can follow along on Instagram at brilliant_balance or at @cskolnicki. And I look forward to continuing this journey with you. That's all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.